Commander Lee Hyun sat in his chair on the bridge of the space station orbiting Earth, staring at the blank screen in front of him. For the past 6 hours, he had been trying to contact New Eden Colony, but every attempt failed. The silence was deafening. New Eden was not just any colony. It was humanity's pride and joy, located on a beautiful planet called Kepler 442c, about 40 light-years from Earth. The planet had perfect weather, rich soil, and everything humans needed to build a new home. 50,000 people lived there. Farmers who grew food to feed other colonies, scientists studying the new world, and families who had traveled across the galaxy to start fresh lives. "Sir, I've tried everything," said Lieutenant Park Min-ho, wiping sweat from his forehead. He had been working at the communications console for hours, adjusting frequencies and boosting signal strength. The colony should have sent their weekly report 3 days ago. They've never missed one before. Lee Hyun felt his stomach tighten. In the 12 years since New Eden was established, the colonists had sent a report every single week without fail. The reports were simple: how many crops they harvested, any problems they faced, updates about new births, deaths, or marriages. It was their lifeline to Earth, proof that humanity could survive and thrive among the stars. "What do the long-range scanners show?" Lee Hyun asked, though he dreaded the answer. Park Min-ho checked his instruments again, hoping he had made a mistake earlier. "The buildings are still there, sir. All the houses, the farms, the community centers. They look untouched. But there are no heat signatures, no movement, no signs of any living person. It's like everyone just disappeared." The silence on the bridge was heavy. Everyone knew what this meant, but nobody wanted to say it out loud. 50,000 people do not just vanish into thin air. Something terrible had happened on New Eden. Lee Hyun stood up and walked to the large window overlooking Earth. The blue and green planet looked peaceful from space, but he knew that soon this peace would be shattered. "Send a priority message to Earth Command," he ordered. "Tell them we've lost contact with New Eden Colony. Request immediate investigation." 3 hours later, Admiral Kim So-young received the report in her office at Earth Command headquarters. She was a tough woman who had spent 30 years protecting humanity's colonies from pirates, hostile aliens, and natural disasters. But, as she read the words on her screen, she felt a chill run down her spine. The report was short but terrifying. New Eden Colony, 50,000 men, women, and children had gone completely silent. No distress calls, no emergency signals, nothing. The colony that had taken humanity 15 years and billions of dollars to establish was now as quiet as a graveyard. Kim So-young had seen many crises during her career. She had dealt with colony rebellions, alien first contacts, and wars between planets. But this felt different. This felt like the beginning of something much worse. She picked up her secure phone and dialed the President's direct line. "Sir, we have a situation. New Eden has gone dark. All 50,000 colonists are missing, presumed dead. I need authorization to send a full investigation fleet immediately." As she waited for the President's response, Kim So-young stared at the star map on her wall. New Eden was marked with a bright green dot, representing humanity's farthest successful colony. But now that green dot felt like a warning sign. For the first time in human history, an entire colony had been wiped out without a trace. Something was out there in the darkness between the stars, something that wanted humanity gone. And it had just made its first move. Captain Choi Jun-woo had seen war zones before, but nothing prepared him for what he found when his ships arrived at New Eden Colony. As his fleet of 12 investigation vessels dropped out of hyperspace, the first thing that struck him was the eerie silence. No radio chatter, no navigation beacons, no signs of life at all. "Take us into orbit slowly," he ordered his pilot. "Keep all sensors active and weapons ready." As they approached the planet, the images on their screens made everyone on the bridge go quiet. New Eden looked like a carefully constructed puzzle that someone had taken apart piece by piece. The buildings were gone, but not destroyed in the face, where you would expect from bombs or explosions. Instead, everything had been taken apart with surgical precision. Dr. Yang Hye-jin, the fleet's chief scientist, stared at her scanner readings in disbelief. "Captain, these readings don't make sense. The buildings weren't blown up or burned down. They were disassembled molecule by molecule. Someone or something took them apart like they were made of building blocks." When the landing teams reached the surface, the true horror became clear. The main street of New Eden, which once bustled with families and children, was now perfectly clean. Too clean. Not even a single piece of trash remained. The roads looked like they had been scrubbed with acid until every trace of human footsteps was gone. "Look at these patterns," Dr. Yang called out, kneeling beside strange markings burned into the ground. The burns formed perfect geometric shapes, circles, triangles, and lines that intersected at exact angles. "These aren't random. Someone made these on purpose. They're like signatures." Lieutenant Na Sung-min, who was leading the ground team, felt his hands shake as he walked through what used to be the residential area. His own sister had lived here with her family. He knew exactly where her house should have been, but now there was only empty ground with those same geometric burn marks. "Captain," his voice cracked over the radio, "I'm at coordinates where the Kim family house was supposed to be. There's nothing left, not even foundation stones. It's like the house was never built here at all." The most heartbreaking discovery came when they reached the community center. This building had been the heart of New Eden Colony, where families gathered for celebrations, where children performed in school plays, and where colonists displayed their artwork and family photos. Dr. Yang ran her scanner over the area, and her face went pale. "Captain, you need to see this. Whatever did this didn't just destroy the building. They destroyed every single piece of human culture inside it. Look at these molecular traces." Her scanner showed microscopic evidence of paintings, photographs, children's drawings, and musical instruments, all broken down to their basic atoms and scattered. Even the family pictures that people kept on their desks had been dissolved. Completely. "They found every single photograph," Dr. Yang whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "Wedding pictures, baby photos, graduation ceremonies, everything that showed these people lived and loved and had dreams. They erased it all." "Lieutenant." Na Sung-min knelt down and picked up a handful of the strange dust that covered everything. Under his microscope, he could see traces of what used to be human belongings: a child's toy, someone's wedding ring, a book of poetry, all reduced to identical grey powder. "This wasn't just an attack," he said, his voice barely audible. "This was an erasure. They didn't want to just kill our people. They wanted to make it like we never existed here at all. Like 50,000 human lives never mattered, never left a mark on this world." The investigation team worked for 3 days, but the conclusion was always the same. Whoever did this had technology far beyond anything humans possessed, and they had used it with one clear purpose: to completely remove every trace of human presence from New Eden Colony. The Emergency Council chamber on Earth had never been so quiet. For 3 straight days and nights, the most powerful leaders of humanity had been locked in heated debates, their voices echoing off the marble walls as they argued about what to do next. Now, as Admiral Kim So-young entered the room, even the whispered conversation stopped. The massive screens around the chamber showed the horrifying images from New Eden Colony: empty streets where children once played, geometric burn patterns where homes once stood, and the grey dust that was all that remained of 50,000 human lives. Every person in that room had seen these images hundreds of times, but they still felt like a punch to the gut. President Oh Tae-wook looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded his eyes, and his usually perfect suit was wrinkled from sleeping at his desk. Around the circular table sat prime ministers, colony governors, military commanders, and corporate leaders from across human space. They represented over 2 billion people spread across dozens of worlds. "Admiral Kim," the president said, his voice hoarse from days of discussion, "we've been debating for 72 hours straight. Some want to build stronger defenses around our colonies. Others think we should try to communicate with these aliens, find out what they want. But you requested this emergency session. What do you have to tell us?" Admiral Kim walked to the center of the chamber, her military boots clicking against the polished floor. She had spent 30 years defending humanity, fighting pirates and hostile aliens across the galaxy. But she had never faced an enemy like this. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "The investigation reports from New Eden are complete. We are dealing with entities that our scientists are calling erasers. Their technology is not just advanced, it's centuries, maybe millennia ahead of ours." She pressed a button, and the holographic display showed a three-dimensional map of the attack site. "Look at this precision. They didn't just kill our colonists. They erased every trace that humans ever lived on that planet. They dissolved family. Photographs down to individual molecules. They turned children's toys into dust. They made it as if 50,000 human lives never happened." Governor Lee Min-jung from the Mars colony raised her hand. "Admiral, surely there must be some way to reason with them. Every species we've encountered has been willing to negotiate." "No," Admiral Kim replied firmly. "This is different. These aliens don't want our territory. They don't want our resources. They want us gone completely forever, as if humanity never existed in the first place." The room erupted in worried murmurs. Corporate leader Park Dong-woo stood up. "But Admiral, if their technology is so advanced, how can we possibly fight them? Wouldn't it be suicide?" Admiral Kim's expression hardened. "Mr. Park, they erased 50,000 of our people. Farmers, teachers, doctors, children, who were just learning to walk. They tried to make it like these people never lived, never loved, never mattered to anyone." She activated another holographic display, this one, showing humanity's colonies scattered across the galaxy. Bright dots represented Earth, Mars, the mining stations in the asteroid belt, the research outposts near distant stars, and the farming worlds that fed the growing human population. "There can be only one response to what they did," she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Total mobilization. Every ship, every factory, every resource on every human world. We build the largest fleet in galactic history." President Oh Tae-wook leaned forward in his chair. "How large are we talking about, Admiral?" 700,000. "Warships," she replied without hesitation. "Every shipyard working around the clock, every mining operation pushed to maximum output, every human world contributing everything they have." The chamber fell silent again. The number was staggering. Humanity had never built more than a few thousand military ships at one time. "That's impossible," whispered Defense Minister Yoon Seo-jin. "The cost alone would bankrupt every colony." Admiral Kim turned to face the entire assembly. "The cost of not doing this is the complete extinction of our species. These erasers made one critical mistake. They showed us exactly what they're capable of, and they showed us that there will be no mercy, no negotiation, no second chances." She paused, letting her words sink in. "If we're going to fall, then the galaxy will know exactly what it costs to try to erase humanity from existence. When other species find the wreckage of this war, they'll understand that some things should never be forgotten." The vote was unanimous. The moment President Oh Tae-wook signed the mobilization order, every corner of human space erupted into action. It was as if someone had flipped a switch that turned the entire human civilization into one massive war factory. From Earth to the farthest colonies, the same scene played out. Normal life stopped, and the business of building the largest fleet in galactic history began. On Mars, the luxury spacecraft factories that had been producing beautiful passenger ships for wealthy tourists suddenly changed their purpose. Factory manager Kang Min-soo gathered his workers in the main assembly hall, the red dust of Mars visible through the massive windows behind him. "Everyone, listen up," he announced to the crowd of engineers and technicians. "As of today, we're not making pleasure cruises anymore. We're building destroyers, fast, deadly ships that can take a beating and dish one out. I know it's a big change, but our people on New Eden are counting on us." The workers didn't complain. They rolled up their sleeves and got to work, learning how to install weapon systems instead of swimming pools, armor plating instead of observation decks. The sound of construction echoed across the Martian landscape day and night. In the asteroid belt, where massive mining platforms pulled precious metals from floating rocks, the pace of work tripled overnight. Mining supervisor Cho Yeon-soo hadn't seen her family in weeks, living on energy drinks and determination as she pushed her crews to extract every ounce of steel, titanium, and rare earth metals they could find. "Keep those extractors running," she shouted over the noise of the machinery. "Every gram of metal we pull out of these rocks becomes armor for our ships. Our people died because we weren't ready. We won't make that mistake again." But nowhere was the transformation more dramatic than on Titan, Saturn's largest moon, where the civilian shipyards had been converted into military production facilities. Engineer Lim Dong-hyuk had been working for 72 hours straight, surviving on coffee and pure willpower as he supervised the complete overhaul of the shipbuilding process. His clothes were stained with grease, his eyes were bloodshot. But his voice was strong as he called out orders. "We need more steel processors online by tomorrow morning. The fabrication units need to be recalibrated for military-grade hulls, and someone get me an update on the weapon mounting systems." His assistant, Park Jimin, ran up with a tablet full of production reports. "Sir, the workers are asking if they can take breaks. Some of them have been welding for 18 hours straight." Lim Dong-hyuk wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked out at the massive construction bays where dozens of warships were taking shape. "Tell them they can rest when every human in the galaxy is safe. Admiral Kim wants 700,000 ships, and by God, we're going to give her 700,000 ships." The mobilization wasn't just about factories and materials, it was about people. Across human space, young men and women who had been planning normal lives suddenly found themselves answering a different calling. The military academies couldn't process the flood of volunteers, so they set up emergency recruitment centers on every major world. On Luna, Earth's moon, the main recruitment center was packed with teenagers and young adults who had put their lives on hold to defend humanity. 17-year-old Song Hai-won stood in line with thousands of others, her high school graduation certificate still fresh in her backpack. She had been planning to study art history, but the images from New Eden changed everything. When her turn came to take the oath, she raised her right hand along with hundreds of other young people. The recruiting officer, a grizzled veteran named Colonel Kim Tae-ho, led them in the words that would bind them to military service. "I swear to defend humanity against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to protect our colonies and our people, and to ensure that what happened at New Eden never happens again." Song Hai-won's voice joined the chorus of thousands. "For New Eden," she whispered, tears streaming down her face as she thought about the children who would never grow up, the families who would never be reunited. The greatest mobilization in human history had begun, and it touched every life in human space. Grandparents donated their life savings to buy materials for the fleet. Children collected scrap metal in schoolyard drives. Scientists abandoned their research to work on military technology. Artists painted propaganda posters that showed humanity standing strong against the darkness. Everyone had a part to play in building the fleet that would carry humanity's answer to the stars. Fleet Captain John Min-soo rubbed his tired eyes as he stared at the star charts spread across his command table. For 2 months, his small squadron of fast scout ships had been chasing ghosts across the galaxy, following the faint quantum trails left behind by the aliens who destroyed New Eden Colony. The hunt had taken them through 15 different star systems, each jump carrying them farther from home and deeper into unexplored space. His crew was exhausted, living on ration packs and recycled air, but nobody complained. They all knew that finding these erasers was humanity's only hope of understanding what they were really facing. "Captain," called sensor operator Bae Soo-jin from her station, her voice tight with concentration, "I'm picking up something strange in the next system. The quantum signatures are stronger here, much stronger than anything we've detected before. John." Min-soo walked over to look at her readings. The quantum trail they had been following for weeks suddenly flared into a bright signature that filled her entire screen. "This is it," he said quietly. "This is where they've been operating from." "All ships prepare for system jump," he announced over the intercom. "Stay alert, we don't know what we're going to find out there." The squadron dropped out of hyperspace, and immediately every alarm on every ship started screaming. "Sensor operator." Bae Soo-jin's face went white as she stared at her instruments. "Captain, you need to see this right now," she said, her hands shaking as she transferred the readings to the main screen. What appeared before them made the entire bridge fall silent. They were looking at a planet that had once been beautiful and green, covered with cities that sparkled like jewels under its sun. But now the world was nothing but a sphere of crystallized ash, its surface covered in the same geometric burn patterns they had seen on New Eden. Communications Officer Han Ji-woo gasped when she recognized the planet's shape and size. "Captain, that's Veltani Prime. That's the Veltani homeworld." Everyone on the bridge knew about the Veltani. 20 years ago they had been humanity's first contact with a peaceful alien species. The Veltani were gentle creatures who lived in harmony with nature, created beautiful art, and had welcomed human diplomats with open arms. Their planet had been a paradise, covered with crystal cities and floating gardens. Now it was a tomb. "Run. A deep scan," John Min-soo ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to know how many people lived there." The results came back minutes later. Bae Soo-jin's voice cracked as she read them aloud. 800 million Veltani, sir. All gone. The same molecular erasure pattern we saw on New Eden but on a planetary scale. Han Ji-woo was scrolling through old diplomatic records, her face growing paler with each file she opened. "Captain, the Veltani weren't the only ones. I'm detecting similar signature patterns in 6 other nearby systems. The Kethran Republic, the Zorillian Collective, the Peaceful Traders of Axiom. All of them have been erased." The horrible truth was becoming clear. The erasers hadn't just targeted humanity. They were systematically destroying every intelligent species in this part of the galaxy. "Sir," Bae Soo-jin called out, her voice filled with fear. "I'm picking up massive energy readings from the Omega Nebula. Whatever did this, they're still out there, and they're active." John Min-soo made the hardest decision of his career. "Set course for the Omega Nebula. We need to see what we're really dealing with." What they found there would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Hidden in the swirling gases of the nebula was a massive space station, bigger than most moons. Around it floated hundreds of alien ships, each one sleek and deadly, arranged in perfect geometric formations. But the most terrifying discovery came when they analyzed the station's purpose. It wasn't a military base or a colony ship. It was a sorting facility. The erasers were using it to catalog and classify every intelligent species in the galaxy, deciding which ones deserved to exist and which ones needed to be cleaned up. "They think they're gardeners," Han Ji-woo whispered as she decoded their transmissions. "They see the galaxy as their garden, and every species like us, every species that doesn't meet their standards of perfection, we're just weeds to be pulled out and thrown away." The scout squadron had found their enemy, but they had also discovered something far worse than a simple invasion. The erasers weren't trying to conquer the galaxy. They were trying to perfect it, one dead civilization at a time, and humanity was next on their list. Admiral Yoon Jae-sung had commanded fleets before, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Standing on the bridge of the flagship Remembrance, he gazed out through the massive viewport at the most incredible sight in human history. 700,000 warships floated in perfect formation around him, stretching so far into space that the distant vessels looked like tiny stars. "Fleet." "Status report," he commanded, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was witnessing. Captain Seo Min-woo, his second in command, consulted his command console with obvious pride. "All 700,000 ships reporting ready for combat, sir. Every single hull bears the New Eden memorial inscription, just as you ordered." The inscription was simple but powerful. "They tried to erase us, we remember." Etched into the armor of every ship, from the smallest fighter to the largest dreadnought, it served as a constant reminder of why they were here. The fleet was so massive it had to be spread across 3 entire solar systems just to fit. At the center were the dreadnoughts, ships so large they could house entire cities. Each one bristled with weapons capable of cracking planets and shields that could withstand direct hits from supernovas. These weren't just warships. They were floating fortresses designed to bring humanity's fury to the stars. Surrounding the dreadnoughts were the carrier groups, each one home to thousands of fighter pilots and support crew. Inside the massive hangar bays, mechanics worked around the clock to maintain the small but deadly ships that would spearhead the attack. The carriers themselves were marvels of engineering, capable of launching fighters faster than the eye could follow. Beyond the carriers floated the support vessels, ships that most people never thought about, but were essential to any long-term military operation. Hospital ships staffed with the best doctors in human space, supply vessels carrying enough food and ammunition to feed armies for years, and repair ships equipped with everything needed to rebuild damaged warships in the middle of battle. Fighter. Pilot Kwon Yu-jin sat in her cockpit aboard the carrier Defiance, running through her pre-flight checks for the 100th time. At 23 years old, she had been flying for only 6 months, but she had trained harder than anyone in her squadron. Through her cockpit window, she could see the endless rows of warships stretching into the distance. "Look at this," she whispered to her wingman over the radio. "Look at what we built. 2 years ago, most of these ships didn't even exist. Now we have 700,000 of them, all because 50,000 people died and we decided that was 50,000 too many." Her wingman, pilot Lee Sang-woo, was equally amazed. "My grandfather fought in the colony wars 30 years ago. His entire fleet had maybe 200 ships. We've got 700,000. The erasers have no idea what's coming for them." The numbers were staggering. 700,000 ships meant over 15 million crew members, soldiers, pilots, engineers, doctors, and support staff from every human world. They had come together with one purpose: to make sure that what happened at New Eden never happened again. Admiral Yoon walked to the tactical display, where a 3-dimensional map showed the positions of every ship in the fleet. Red dots represented the dreadnoughts, blue dots were the carriers, green dots were the destroyers and cruisers, and yellow dots were the support vessels. The display looked like a galaxy made of lights. "Communications. Open a channel to all ships," he ordered. "Channel open, sir," replied Communications Officer Park Hae-young. "This is Admiral Yoon to all vessels. In 1 hour, we jump to the Omega Nebula. We go to face an enemy that believes we are inferior, that thinks we can be erased without consequence. They are about to learn that humanity does not go quietly into the dark. They are about to discover what happens when you try to erase a species that refuses to be forgotten." The response came from 700,000 ships simultaneously. A roar of approval that could be heard across 3 solar systems. 15 million human voices raised in defiance of an enemy that had made the mistake of believing humanity would accept extinction. Unknown to the human fleet, Eraser scouts had detected their approach, but the alien minds could not process what they were seeing. In their thousands of years of cleansing operations, they had never encountered a species capable of such overwhelming response. Their computers crashed, trying to count the number of approaching ships. The largest fleet in galactic history was about to teach the Erasers their final lesson. The moment had finally arrived. Admiral Yoon Jae-sung stood on the bridge of the Remembrance, looking out at the swirling gases of the Omega Nebula where the Eraser fleet was hiding. His hands were steady, his voice calm, but inside his heart was pounding. This was it, the moment that would determine whether humanity survived or joined the long list of species that had been erased from existence. "Communications, open all. Frequencies. I want every Eraser ship to hear this," he commanded. Communications Officer Park Hae-young's fingers flew across her console. "All frequencies open, sir. Broadcasting on every channel across the electromagnetic spectrum." Admiral Yoon took a deep breath and began to speak, knowing that his words would be heard not just by the enemy, but by every human in the fleet. 15 million people who had left their homes and families to be here. "This is Admiral Yoon Jae-sung of the Human Defense Fleet, speaking to the entities known as the Erasers. You came to our world of New Eden. You murdered 50,000 innocent people, farmers, teachers, children who had never harmed anyone. But you didn't just kill them. You tried to erase every trace that they had ever existed, as if their lives meant nothing." He paused, letting his words echo across space. "We are here to demonstrate why that was the wrong choice." The response came faster than anyone expected. Within minutes, the nebula began to glow as thousands of alien ships emerged from the gas clouds. The Eraser fleet was a thing of terrible beauty. 30,000 vessels that moved with perfect mathematical precision, each ship a work of art, that spoke of technology centuries beyond anything humans possessed. Captain Seo Min Woo, studying the enemy formation on his tactical display, felt his stomach clench. "Sir, their ships are incredible. Look at those energy readings. Each one of their vessels could probably destroy 100 of ours." But Admiral Yoon didn't look worried. "Captain, how many ships do they have?" 30,000, sir. "And how many do we have?" 700,000. "Sir?" Admiral Yoon smiled grimly. "Then the math is simple. Across the human fleet, ship captains were making final preparations for battle. Captain Lee Yoon-ji, commanding the destroyer squadron New Eden's Vengeance, walked through her ship's corridors, speaking personally to her crew. These weren't professional soldiers. Most of them were civilians who had volunteered after seeing the images from New Eden. "Listen to me," she said, gathering her crew in the main hangar bay. "In a few minutes, we're going to face an enemy with technology we can't match. Their weapons are more powerful. Their shields are stronger, their ships are faster. But they made one critical mistake." She pointed to the memorial wall where the names of New Eden's victims were displayed. "They thought they could erase 50,000 people and we would just accept it. They thought we would be afraid. They were wrong." Her weapons officer, a young man named Kim Jae-ho, who had been a college student 6 months ago, raised his hand. "Captain, what if we don't make it?" "Back?" Captain Lee looked at him with fierce pride. "Then we make sure they remember us. We make sure that when other species find the wreckage of this battle, they understand that humanity doesn't go quietly. We fight for every single person they tried to erase." On the fighter carrier, Defiance, pilot Kwon Yu-jin was strapped into her cockpit waiting for the launch order. Through her radio, she could hear the nervous chatter of hundreds of other pilots, young men and women who had learned to fly in the past year, trained for this single moment. "All fighters, this is Squadron Leader Park Dongmin," came the voice over the radio. "Remember your training, stay with your wingmen, and remember why we're here, for the families on New Eden who will never see another sunrise." The two fleets slowly approached each other across the void of space. On one side, the Erasers, 30,000 ships representing a civilization that had perfected the art of destruction, that had wiped out dozens of species without ever losing a battle. Their ships moved in perfect formation, confident in their technological superiority. On the other side, humanity's massive armada, 700,000 ships carrying 15 million people who had never wanted to be warriors but had chosen to fight rather than accept extinction. Their formation was less perfect, their technology inferior, but their determination was absolute. The Erasers had never lost a battle because they had never faced an enemy like this. They had never encountered a species willing to sacrifice everything, to build the largest fleet in galactic history, just to ensure that their enemy understood the price of trying to erase them. The battle for humanity's survival was about to begin. The battle began at 0600 hours, Galactic Standard Time, and it would rage for 18 of the longest hours in human history. The moment the first shots were fired, space itself seemed to catch fire as energy beams, missiles, and plasma bursts lit up the darkness between the stars. Wing Commander Park Jin-ho led his fighter squadron into the heart of the Eraser formation, knowing it was likely a suicide mission. His small ships danced between the massive alien vessels, dodging energy blasts that could vaporize them in an instant. Through his radio, he could hear the voices of his pilots, young men and women who had been civilians just months ago. "Stay close to me," he called out to his squadron. "Remember, we're not here to survive. We're here to make sure they can't escape." The Eraser ships were everything the intelligence reports had warned about. Their weapons could punch through human shields like they were made of paper. Their energy webs could trap entire squadrons of fighters and dissolve them in seconds. But there was one thing the Erasers hadn't counted on: the sheer number of humans willing to die to stop them. Park Jin-ho's squadron was caught in one of those energy webs, the alien technology wrapping around his fighters like invisible chains. He watched his instruments fail one by one as the web began to tear his ship apart at the molecular level. "This is Wing Commander Park to all units," he transmitted, his voice steady even as his cockpit filled with smoke. Sector 7 is clear. Gov enemy ships. Continue the advance. Remember New Eden. His transmission cut to static as his fighter disintegrated, but his sacrifice had opened the way for 3 more human squadrons to punch through the eraser lines. This scene played out thousands of times across the battlefield. Human ships died by the hundreds, then by the thousands. But for every ship that fell, 20 more moved in to take its place. The erasers had never faced anything like this, an enemy that treated massive casualties not as defeats, but as necessary sacrifices. Captain Lee Yoon-ji, commanding the destroyer, New Eden's Vengeance, watched her tactical display with grim satisfaction. Her ship had been hit 17 times, half her crew was dead or wounded, but they were still fighting. All weapons concentrate fire on that eraser dreadnought, she ordered, blood running down her face from a head wound. I don't care if we don't survive the next 5 minutes. That ship dies today. The mathematical reality of the battle became clear after the first few hours. The erasers had superior technology, but they only had 30,000 ships. Humanity had 700,000. Even if each eraser ship could destroy 20 human vessels before dying, the humans would still have ships left over. The eraser formations, which had operated with perfect precision for millennia, began to break apart under the relentless pressure. Human ships attacked from every angle, above, below, from the sides, sometimes even ramming enemy vessels when their weapons failed. The aliens' careful strategies crumbled in the face of humanity's willingness to accept any cost to win. After 12 hours of continuous fighting, the tide began to turn. The eraser fleet, which had started the battle with 30,000 ships, was down to fewer than 5,000. The human fleet had lost over 200,000 vessels and 3 million people, but they still had 500,000 ships in fighting condition. Admiral Yoon, his flagship battered but still operational, opened communications to the entire human fleet. All ships, final phase. No eraser vessel escapes. No eraser world survives. They tried to erase us. Now we erase them. The last phase of the battle was not a fight. It was an execution. The remaining eraser ships, no longer able to maintain their formations, were hunted, down one by one. When the final alien vessel was reduced to atomic particles, there was no celebration on the human ships. There was only the grim satisfaction of a job completed. But the battle was not over. Following Admiral Yoon's orders, the surviving human fleet spread out across eraser space, systematically destroying every world, every station, every trace of the civilization that had tried to eliminate humanity. Captain Kim Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of his battered cruiser, watching the last eraser planet turn to molten glass under the bombardment from his ship's weapons. His vessel had taken so much damage that half the bridge was open to space, but he and his crew wore their spacesuits and continued their work. New Eden is avenged, he whispered, thinking of the 50,000 people who had died simply for existing. The species that had tried to erase others was now itself erased from existence. 1 year after the battle that changed everything, the New Eden Memorial finally stood complete. The crystalline structure rose from the planet's surface like a mountain made of light, visible even from orbit around the world where 50,000 people had died. Inside its transparent walls, holographic names floated in gentle spirals. Every man, woman, and child who had been erased by the aliens now remembered forever in letters of pure light. President Oh Tae-wook stood before the memorial during its dedication ceremony, looking older than his years. The war had aged him terribly. Deep lines creased his face, and his hair had turned completely gray during the 18 months of mobilization and war. He carried the weight of 3 million military casualties, the price humanity had paid to ensure their survival. Today we remember not just the 50,000 who died here, he said, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd of survivors, veterans, and families of the fallen. We remember the 3 million who gave their lives to make sure this could never happen again. We remember the choice we made as a species, that some things are worth any price to defend. But the real memorial wasn't the crystal monument. It was the message that President Oh broadcast across the galaxy, transmitted on every frequency to every corner of known space. The signal was powerful enough to reach civilizations thousands of light years away, carrying humanity's declaration to the cosmos. This is President Wook of Earth, speaking for all of humanity. We are a species that remembers our dead and protects our own. When the erasers tried to eliminate 50,000 of our people, we traveled 1,000 light years and built 700,000 warships to ensure our enemies understood this truth. We sacrificed 3 million of our own to make sure the galaxy learned this lesson. Test us at your own extinction. Lieutenant Colonel Song Hai-won, who had enlisted as a 17-year-old cadet and survived the entire war, now commanded the memorial station. Every morning at sunrise, she performed the same ritual, reading aloud the names of New Eden's dead. It took her 3 hours to get through all 50,000 names, but she never missed a day. Kim Min-jun, age 34, farmer and father of 2, she would read, her voice echoing through the memorial's crystal chambers. Park Soo-young, age 8, student at New Eden Elementary School. Dr. Lee Young-ho, age 52, colony medical officer. Each name represented a life that had been lived, dreams that had been pursued, families that had been loved. The erasers had tried to make it as if these people never existed, but now their names would shine in the crystal memorial until the end of time. The galaxy's response to humanity's message was swift and dramatic. Alien species that had never contacted Earth before suddenly opened diplomatic channels, offering non-aggression pacts and trade agreements. The Zeltonian Republic, which controlled 3 star systems near human space, immediately sent ambassadors with gifts and promises of eternal friendship. Captain Yu Jae-min, now in charge of monitoring galactic communications, reported the changes to Earth Command. Sir, we're receiving diplomatic requests from 47 different species. They're all offering the same thing, promises never to threaten human colonies, requests for peaceful coexistence and offers to share information about any hostile forces they encounter. Trade routes throughout the galaxy shifted overnight. Merchant ships that had previously traveled through human space now took longer routes to avoid any contact with human vessels, not because humans were hostile, but because every species in the galaxy had seen the recordings of the 700,000 ship armada and understood what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. The message was clear to every civilization that received it. Humanity was not interested in conquest or expansion through force, but they were absolutely committed to protecting their own people, and they had proven they would sacrifice anything, including millions of their own lives, to ensure that protection. On distant worlds, alien leaders studied the recordings of humanity's fleet with mixture of awe and terror. They saw the massive dreadnoughts, the endless fighter squadrons, the supply chains that could support such a force across interstellar distances. But most importantly, they saw the determination of a species that had decided some things were worth any price. The erasers had made a fatal mistake. In trying to erase humanity, they had instead taught the galaxy the most important lesson of all. Some species, when pushed beyond all reason, will move entire stellar economies and sacrifice millions of their own people just to ensure their enemies understand that some things should never be forgotten. Humanity's colonies were now the safest in the galaxy.